If you were brand new diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, or type 2 for that matter, but if you were diagnosed with diabetes today, what would you tell that person? What would you tell them to help them adjust and help them adapt? And it comes to answering this age-old question. What would I answer? The first thing is, yes, of course, the classic, you will be okay and life will be fine, etc., etc. Fill in inspirational, motivational, rah-rah speech here. Life will get better. You will learn. There's a nasty learning curve the first 3, 6, 12 months, and then you'll start to settle into your routine. And I will get into that stuff in just a second. But I do want to have a little more depth to it. Welcome to the Your Diabetes Insider podcast, where we take all of the mysteries of blood sugar control, focusing on nutrition, exercise, and any of the other 40 plus factors that may impact your blood sugar. If you don't know me, my name is Ben Zeal. I'm a registered dietitian, certified diabetes educator, strength and conditioning coach, and I've lived myself with type 1 diabetes for over 20 years. And I am here to share everything that I have learned in both my personal and professional experience so you can live that incredible diabetes life. So get ready and let's dive right into today's episode. Welcome to this week's episode of the Your Diabetes Insider podcast. And what I'm about to cover today is a question that I feel like gets talked about all the time. I've probably been asked it at least a dozen times on other podcasts and in interviews and other things like that. And it's something that you get the same few answers over and over and over again, but I feel like it deserves a little more depth. And that would be, if you were brand new diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, or type 2 for that matter, but if you were diagnosed with diabetes today, what would you tell that person? You know, if someone you knew was diagnosed, what would you tell them to help them adjust and help them adapt? And you get the same types of answers every single time, right? You get well, life's gonna move on and you'll be okay and yada, of course. And I will get into that stuff in just a second. But I do want to have a little more depth to it. And I want to just explore this question because I feel like as of late on different types of social media, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram, I've been getting a lot of messages where people have said, hey, my son, my daughter, my husband, my wife, my friend, my coworker just got diagnosed with diabetes. And it doesn't matter what age they are. They could be 47, they could be 7, they could be 17. Just got diagnosed with diabetes. You know, what should I do? How can I help them? What is the best possible thing for them? How should they eat? And these are questions, of course. I could probably spend 45 minutes on just each of these topics in and of themselves, right? But it's something where when it comes to diabetes and it comes to answering this age-old question, what would I answer? If someone asked me, hey, what should I do for these? What should I do for my daughter, my son, or my coworker, whoever? And what should they know? The first thing is, yes, of course, the classic, you will be okay and life will be fine, etc., etc. Fill in inspirational, motivational, rah-rah speech here. Because yes, if you sit there and you dwell on it and you're negative, like anything in life, right? If you're negative with anything, it's going to just get 10 times worse. It's going to feel 10 times more terrible. It's going to just not be a pleasant experience no matter how you slice it. And quite frankly, diabetes is not pleasant. I'll be the first one to say, but it's just going to be infinitely worse if you take the negative outlook on it. The same way with anything in life, right? A mosquito bite can seem like the end of time if you make it really that bad. So keep that part in mind. So that being said, yes, life will get better. You will learn. There's a nasty learning curve the first 3, 6, 12 months, and then you'll start to settle into your routine with your quote new normal, which I despise that term after the last few years, but here we are, right? So there will be a new sense of normalcy that you will establish. It will get better. It will get easier. Again, just like anything else in life, the first time that you ride a bike or throw a baseball, you're probably not very good at it. But the 45th time that you ride a bike, you're probably pretty darn good, right? There was a stat I saw somewhere that said if you were to spend, I think it was 18 minutes per day or something like that, it was 18 minutes per day on any specific type of skill, and you were to do that every single day for a year, you would be ahead of 90+% of the population at that particular skill. So that could be playing guitar, bowling, whatever you want it to be, right? Literally over 90% of the population, you would be further along than just by doing 18 minutes a day. So keep that in mind. A lot of it is consistency. Consistency is going to stack. And the bigger thing I would say with this is, okay, yes, there's the mindset side. Develop the good habits now is what I would tell somebody out of the gate. Because I'm not going to lie, once you develop your habits, once you develop what your normal is, whether that's, hey, I'm going to make sure I'm dosing 15 minutes, 20 minutes before my meal, or I'm going to test before my meals, I'm going to take my meds at a certain time, I'm going to make sure I'm carb counting a certain way. If you develop that now, it is going to be so much easier for you to be able to maintain that going forward versus the alternative when you have bad habits. So think of it like this, right? When you're a kid, everyone says that it's easier for kids to learn languages, right? Because they're younger, maybe the brain's more malleable, whatever. I don't know all the science, but apparently it's a thing where it's easier to learn a language when you're a kid. It's easier to learn a skill when you're a kid. And then as you get older, it might be, neuroplasticity, whatever. This isn't a brain chemistry podcast, but what I'm trying to say here is once you develop a bad habit, it's harder to break out of it. Think of football, right? Think of an NFL quarterback. They have a drop back every pass, right? They take the ball from the center, they take X number of steps back, and then they go to throw the ball. If you come out of the gate with terrible steps, your steps are just all choppy and weird. If you learn the proper way to do it right away, you'll have really strong footwork. But if you do the same thing for years and years and years and years and years, your footwork's going to be really not great, and it's going to be so deeply ingrained that changing it is going to be that much harder. Let that sink in for just a second. If you've done something the same way for years, it's going to be that much harder to change it. And sure, you can overcome it, but it's going to be that much more difficult. So I would encourage you, no matter what age you are listening to this, if you're newly diagnosed, establish the good habits now. If you're someone who's had diabetes for a while and you haven't established good habits, start the good habits now because it's only going to get that much easier. Think of the people that, I want to floss every day. Okay, well, once you do it for 21 days, it's a habit, is what the research allegedly says, and it's really supposed to be closer to 2 months, but I digress. Once you've done it for a consistent period of time, it ain't going to be that hard anymore. But the important thing is you have to be willing to do that. So take that extra step, take that extra moment to establish these habits that you're learning up front and quickly. Because the sooner they're part of your life, the better your blood sugars are going to be in the short term and in the long term. So that would be number one. Number two, and man, I may get some flack for this, but I shouldn't. Measure your damn food. Literally. It's not fun. It's not sexy. And no, I'm not advocating for you to take your measuring cups around in a purse or a backpack or take your food scale places. But what I will say is measuring your food and having precision with your food measurements to the point where you can take food out of a container and be within a couple grams of how much it actually weighs. That is a skill that 99.9% of people do not have, but more importantly, will serve you very, very, very well in life. And what I mean by that is, think about it, right? If you're at home and you're measuring out your food, let's say I get out a bag of chips, right? I want to get some chips, put them on my plate. I can put the plate on the counter and I can just, throw some chips on it. Or I can put my plate on top of a food scale and put some chips on it. The amount of effort is exactly the same. Maybe I have to spend an extra 2 seconds to turn on the food scale. But the difference is I now know how many servings of chips I just had versus if I didn't. And I wouldn't know how many servings of chips I just had. And if I don't know how many servings of chips I had, my insulin dose might be wrong. My dose might be wrong. Now my blood sugar might go low or high. And now I'm on a roller coaster from something that I could have prevented by just spending an extra literal 2 seconds. So think about that for a second. Literally 2 seconds, the difference potentially between having amazing blood sugars with a meal or not. And the other thing that this captures is you start to get a sense of how much something is. So again, it's that repetition thing, right? Everything in life is repetitions, but you have now been measuring out, let's just say it's, rice into a bowl for a couple years. You go out to a restaurant, you get some rice on the side. You're going to be a heck of a lot more accurate in estimating how much rice you are eating at that meal out at the Japanese restaurant or the Indian restaurant or wherever you're going. Both those sound really good right now. But you're going to have a much clearer picture of knowing how much you're taking for instead of just dialing up, I hope it's 6 units, boom. That's not going to do you any good. So measure the food to not just build the skill for the future so you can eyeball better, but also so you just have the better blood sugars now and you can count more proficiently. I cannot emphasize that one enough. And no one wants to do it. And trust me, you don't have to do it, but you will thank yourself later. Next one would be brand new diagnosed. Of course, the goal is not to overwhelm, but also to be real. Something I would tell people to stash away later on would be carbs are not the only food that's going to impact. Carbs are not the only nutrient that are going to impact your blood sugar. There we go. Fat and protein can and will absolutely wreak havoc on your blood sugars if you're not careful. And there's something to look out for. They're not something to worry about right now. Focus on the carbs right now. You're brand new diagnosed. Focus on measuring those carbs. Focus on dosing appropriately for those carbs. But recognize that at some point down the road, you will have to pay attention to fat and protein because if you do not, you will see delayed rises in your blood sugars that you wonder, are they basal related? Or did I not take enough for the meal? What happened? And they get really, really, really frustrating. They get really old really fast, especially when you wake up at 2 a.m. and your blood sugar's 317 and you have no idea what happened because you went to bed and you were 135 and felt perfectly fine. So bear that in mind. Don't worry about it now. Eventually you'll address it, ideally with the now and later dosing technique that our team teaches all of our patients. But know that that's a thing so that there's no mystery if and when something happens delayed. And on that same note, something to know if you were just diagnosed, there's not normally an accident. Like sometimes people will say, oh, there's no reason for my blood sugar to do fill in the blank. I don't know why it did it. It's a fluke. It's definitely not a fluke. There's always something that is causing it. Now, on the flip side, there's over 40 things that can impact your blood sugar. So pinpointing exactly which one of them, not super likely, but the majority are the simple ones, right? Carbs, technically really food, right? In that whole area. Food, exercise, sleep, stress. Those are the top 4. Far and away. Not to say the rest is just details, but the rest of them, okay, well, there's illness and there's weather / temperature and there's altitude and there's, all sorts of other littler things. There's adrenaline from playing in a sporting event or having a competition or performance. But remember, those core 4 are the core 4 for a reason. So keep that part in mind as well. But on a similar note to that, something I just alluded to, you were just diagnosed today. Whether you have a background in it or not, find some sort of physical activity that you enjoy and do it regularly. So this could be, hey, I don't like working out. Amazing. You don't have to go to the gym and lift weights. You can go to a class, right? You can go to a dance type of class. You can go do something in the water. Water aerobics are fantastic. You can go for a walk, right? You can do a workout video in your living room. It does not matter what you do. I would just encourage you highly to make sure that you are doing something physically active. And while there's 18,000 reasons, and I wouldn't want to overwhelm someone who's newly diagnosed with all of them, recognize that insulin sensitivity with exercise will go up. So whether you are walking, whether you are jogging, whether you are lifting weights, whether you are doing a dance class, whether you're swimming, you will temporarily boost your insulin sensitivity for up to 72 hours, which is pretty awesome. Now, as you get more and more trained and you're more used to it, it may only be closer to 24 hours, or your body may just expect it. But regardless, it will have the potential to boost your insulin sensitivity for a while, which is good. And as you're consistent, your body has this baseline of insulin sensitivity. The other thing it does is if you're doing some sort of muscle building activity, which I would highly recommend, pretty much regardless of age. If you're a kid, you can always do some sort of push-ups or sit-ups or, V-ups are better than sit-ups, but I digress, right? There's different body weight movements you can do to gain some strength. Resistance training is going to be great because you're going to build muscle, and muscle brings insulin sensitivity with it at baseline. So if you're stronger, you have more muscle on your body, you are more likely to be insulin sensitive because muscle is a more metabolically active tissue than body fat. So that's another really nice added bonus too. Just by having more muscle on your frame, sure, you're technically burning more calories at rest, but you're also more insulin sensitive. So ideally your blood sugars stay in range more frequently, or have the ability to do so because of the muscle. So that's super cool. So far, let me back up. So far we've covered what? The classic, it will get better. We've covered the consistency aspect of things and developing the good habits. We've covered measuring your food. We've covered activity, a little bit on fat and protein. Something else, I would encourage you to go out to a restaurant almost immediately. You might say, well, why? That seems really irresponsible. No, because you have to consider it as something where you want to burst through anything that feels off limits very soon into the process. Because I have seen this with patients before. I can count on 2 hands the number of people I've seen this with just off the top of my head. And what happens is somebody lives their life a certain way, especially if they're an adult. They get diagnosed as an adult. This is the most common where I see it. But regardless, you're diagnosed at a certain point. Because you're diagnosed and you're super concerned, I got to make sure everything's perfect. Got to make sure my blood sugars are great. Got to make sure everything's amazing. I got to make sure my food's on point. They end up afraid of eating out. So then you're thinking, okay, well, at some point they got to go to a restaurant. They won't for years. And so think about what happens. If your brain is concerned about a certain activity and you continue to repress and bury it deep in there, when it comes time to finally appear in front of that thing, it will come back with a vengeance, a nasty, nasty vengeance. So think about this. I'm not going to go to a restaurant, or I can't order that, or I can't have anything fun, or I can't have anything on the menu that I actually would want, or that I could eat before I was diagnosed, or think of all these types of thoughts, because you may have had some of these before, or you may have them now. And I'm not telling you to go out and order, the giganto triple stack burger with French fried onions and bacon and barbecue sauce and all sorts of whatever, cheese sauce. I'm not advocating for you to do that. What I am advocating for you to do is pick something reasonable that you would enjoy at a restaurant. Maybe, for example, I'm just going to pick an easy thing off the top of my head. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm going to go get a grilled chicken sandwich and get some waffle fries on the side and something else, right? So you've got your fries, which is something you probably want. Grilled chicken sandwich, pretty reasonable option. And with this, you're using this experience to do 2 things. Number 1, demonstrate that you can carb count foods away from home. Some places, if they're a chain, will have nutrition information, which is obviously super helpful. But second, you're also showing that you can do it. You're showing that you can do this away from home and carb count away from home, but that you can actually consume this food. And again, it sounds really silly when you hear me say it out loud, but ask somebody who's been diagnosed with diabetes for 18 months and is petrified of eating anything outside of their very small little selection of food because they are so worried about what their blood sugar might do that they've avoided anything that they've actually wanted for a long time. And then think about how someone may spiral from that. You start thinking these thoughts of, well, I can't have it. I shouldn't have it. It's terrible. It's a bad idea. And then there are situations where you end up in a situation with this food all around you, a social event or something, and the urge becomes uncontrollable and you end up not just eating some, but you end up way overeating. And then the blood sugars really have a problem. And then you're really petrified of food and things can go really, really, really south really, really, really quickly. And I will say at a baseline, most people with diabetes have some sort of disorder relationship with food. That's just, we have to deal with that. I'm going to do a whole nother episode about that in of itself. But in a situation like this, if you're not trying to get some sort of food away from home, you don't have to go to a restaurant. You could go to, Aunt Sally's house or something, but food that you would want to enjoy and having it and being confident in what you're doing, even if it's a colossal L, even if your blood sugar goes up to 270 and you're like, holy cow, that was brutal. I want you to have done it. I want you to have tried it. I want you to also have then taken the information from it and bring it back to your care team so they can make adjustments with you like a care team should be doing. And if they're not, someone whose care team might be able to help you, wink, wink. But besides that, right, you have the data so you can do better the next time. And on top of that, you've also now said, hey, I've got the first one out of the way. Sometimes that's the scariest part, is getting that first one out of the way. Hey, I did it. Hey, I'm good. I survived it. I did fantastic. No matter what the result was, I did the best I could with what I have. And now I'm not afraid of this thing. And like I said, I'm not advocating for you to go get a Big Mac, a large fry, and a milkshake, right? I'm saying get within reason, something that you would enjoy. And, maybe it's something that's a little off the cuff, and that's okay. But getting that out of the way earlier than later will help, as long as you're doing it within reason, to help establish, yes, there is no food to me that is off limits, and I know this. That is a big, 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 big deal. And then another thing I would note on the food front, as you can tell, diabetes and food have a very intimate relationship. You are not limited to eating low carb. You are not limited to eating only carbs. You are able to consume food in a way that works for you, your body, and your blood sugars. And I know I've discussed this previously, and it's something where people feel limited. A couple of the people that reached out to me even said, hey, my daughter was recently diagnosed. I've been coming across different ways of eating. I don't want her to be low carb. She's 10, thinking about, very high, very, very high carb, low fat, low protein way of eating. Is this a good idea? And quite frankly, for a 10-year-old especially, the answer is no. But outside of that, think about it, right? Any extreme is not going to promote what you're looking for, which is a healthy relationship with food. And I'm not saying that keto doesn't work for anyone, or low carb doesn't work for anyone, or super high carb doesn't work. It may work amazing for you, but it would not be the first approach I would take if you are diagnosed today. The biggest thing I can suggest is taking the approach of, how can I get back to eating very similarly to how I was, assuming, caveat here is, assuming it was working for me and I was living a healthy, fit life. If you were, 25 pounds overweight, or you were, underweight, or something was going on where you weren't technically a, paradigm of health and you wanted to improve anyway, use this as a good jumping off point to help you with that. But if you were someone that, hey, I was living a normal life, I was working out 4 days a week, I had a good cardio base, I was eating pretty good, we want to get you back to eating like that again. If you had some room to improve, use this as some room to improve, but not swinging the pendulum all the way to one end or the other, because the odds of you sticking to that are not going to be very likely. And more often than not, you probably will get pretty miserable, and that's where that relationship with food can start to happen, and that I was alluding to before, and that deterioration is a very, very, very real thing. All right, I would say if I could give any more insight to someone who's newly diagnosed, or if I was diagnosed today, what I would want to hear, and here's your other cliche answer, is you are your only limitation outside of being an astronaut. You literally can do whatever you want. And if you listen to the first episode of this podcast, I went through how during my baseball career, I went through hell and back, a lot of it due to the diabetes and a lot of being told no again and again and again. And it was frustrating, but no one gets to decide what you can and can't do when living with diabetes. The only person who gets to decide that is you. No one else gets to determine that for you. So if you're diagnosed today, or you were diagnosed 20 years ago, you are the only person causing any sort of limitations. You want to be a high level athlete? It's totally possible. There are multiple NFL players right now, multiple Major League Baseball players, multiple NHL players. There have been NBA players as well. There are athletes at the highest highest level. They're Olympic level athletes. Tons of people have thrived with type 1 diabetes. There are other people, within entertainment that have diabetes and are doing just fine. You will be just fine as long as you believe that you can do whatever it is you want to do. I've worked with a patient who was one of the first commercial airline pilots with type 1. That had been unheard of a few years ago, and now it's a thing. And now there are more just like them who are willing and able and want to do this. So anything is possible living with diabetes. It is just a matter of if you are willing to allow yourself to think that it's possible. You can eat the foods you love, you can get strong, you can lose weight, you can gain muscle, you can accomplish anything you want professionally, socially, within relationship. You can do anything you want to do and live a perfectly normal, perfectly amazing life unrestricted by diabetes, as long as you're willing to put in just a little bit of effort to make it happen. And once you have that foundation, you're pretty much good to ride from there. So keep that part in mind. But this is what I would tell you if you were diagnosed today, or what I would hope someone would tell me if I was diagnosed today. I was diagnosed about 24 years ago, a little bit more than that at this point. So it's been a minute. So I hope that this wisdom helps you, whether you've had diabetes for 3 days or 3 decades. I hope that you've gotten something valuable from this. Of course, let me know if you did get something. Give me a 5-star on back that part up stuff. If you did get something valuable from this, leave us an awesome review on the podcast. We'll appreciate that. Definitely, if you're looking for some support of some sort, feel free to shoot me a message over on Instagram at manofzeel, MANOFTZEEL, or on TikTok, same handle. Happy to support you however that I can. And with that, happy Diabetes Awareness Month, and I'll catch you in the next episode.